On July 16th, 2021, the movie Space Jam 2 was released into theaters. This was a big deal in pop culture. You probably had a conversation about this movie. One of you probably had an opinion. And if it seems like it was a long time ago, it's because it was. It was 11 months ago. You probably don't remember the minutiae about the movie Space Jam 2, but you do probably remember a time when Space Jam 2 was important, and how far away that was from right now. Anyway, I mention all this because the day before Space Jam was released, July 15th, the call for papers for RSA closed. In the time since then, we've had Squid Game, Britney was freed, Marvel released more than 22 hours of programming in its cinematic universe. 11 months is a long time. Also, Log4j lapsus and the war in Ukraine happened. We're in a very different place. Where does that leave RSA?
Things have happened.
So, I mean,
it kind of makes you wonder what's going to happen like in the 45 days between now and blackout.
Welcome to SC from the Trade Floor, a podcast recorded a few buildings away from the trade floor. But in a way, aren't we all on the trade floor? I'm Joe Uchel, senior reporter for SC Media. RSA conference was supposed to wrap up this year with enough time for everyone to fly home for Valentine's Day. But the Omicron coronavirus outbreak led to a 4-month delay, and it was a pretty big 4 months. Just 2 weeks after the original scheduled end of the conference, Russia invaded Ukraine, marking the first time a nation prone to use cyber weaponry against civilians entered a war of aggression. A month after that, the Lapsus group turned extortion on its head, and a month after that, the versatile pipe dream malware became only the 7th known malware to target ICS. A conference that was planned in the last 5 months, encompassing all these events, may look different, but not in all the ways you might expect. RSA is designed with some leeway to allow for breaking news after the submissions close. This was an abnormal year for breaking news, and the decision to delay the conference was not made lightly, said Linda Gray Martin, VP of RSACon.
Health and safety is absolutely our top priority, and with the surge in COVID cases around the world at the end of last year, we made that decision to move in the hope we could bring the industry safely together in June. And, we put an incredible amount of thought and care into every single decision we make, and it was no exception. We made the decision quickly, but it was kind of 2 to 3 days of very intense discussions with all the key stakeholders.
This is the first in-person RSA conference since 2020, when the conference was held just days before the states began instituting lockdowns.
It was definitely an interesting experience because I think we were right on the cut. I don't think anybody realized at the time what we were faced with.
That left a choice between canceling the conference, converting to a virtual program, something they did in 2021 at the height of the pandemic, and rescheduling. But the event loses something when it isn't in person. Like all digital conferences, the talks felt like they were being delivered into a void rather than into an audience. RSA Conference's legendary trade floor didn't translate well into an online chat room. The best option, they decided, was to delay the event. And suddenly, there was an extra 5 months to wait. So how would the conference have changed accounting for those 5 months?
I think we would still see a little bit more of the conversations getting into this year. That would have been Log4j, I think, would have been in the middle of that block, right? So there might be some conversations on that. Recent things that are making the headlines, other vulnerabilities, other breaches and incidents, Lapsus, I think, Okta, etc. There are some others that probably would be worth conversations that aren't in the mix now from that delay.
That's John Hammond, senior security researcher for Huntress Labs and a speaker at this year's RSA conference. Log4j, which he mentioned, actually broke a little bit before the first RSA conference was supposed to take place. But while Log4j would not have dominated the submissions to the conference or appeared in proportion to the interest in the topic, it would have made an appearance. Britta Glade, Senior Director of Content and Curation for the RSA conference, told me that the conference regularly leaves empty slots for emergent news.
We have open slots that we leave up until the last minute, but we also, through that process of submissions, of decks, of all of that, some people change things completely. I've got one that I'm working on with a particular speaker on the open source track with, gosh, what we were going to present in February, that's already out there now. So what I'd like to present instead is, can you have the program committee look at that?
I changed my talk.
Ben Miller, Vice President of Professional Services and R&D with Dragos.
Originally, my talk was going to be on trends from our last 5 years of year in review that we do. And after Pipe Dream kind of did a pause of like, this is something new, this isn't a trend, and certainly something that we need to just dig into deeper on. So I went through an arduous process to go through the speaker committee and get my topic changed to Pipe Dream and the significance of that.
There are a handful of talks that now focus on geopolitical adversaries inspired by Ukraine, and it almost certainly will be a subtext added to a number of the talks. But that may come at the cost of forgetting some of the important issues raised in the days before the original RSA conference date. As Casey Ellis, founder, chairman, and CEO of BugCrowd, explained.
Because I think Log4j was fresh. I actually think so one of the things that we've actually been talking about more recently, but I think would have been fresher in people's minds in January, February, is the fact that the security industry just in general got burnt out by Log4j. There was all of this activity, people lost their Christmas, all these different things were happening. And then what we saw that was actually correlated by a bunch of other folks that are watching activity research, all that kind of stuff, it all sort of stopped on the 3rd or the 4th of January. And we're like, what's up with that? What's going on? Did the defenders decide they fixed everything, or did the attackers get bored, or whatever? And the overwhelming response was everyone just needed a break.
While many of the talks reflect the conversations we were having last summer, the underlying issues behind those conversations haven't gone away as attention's focused elsewhere. The conference leans heavily into the emergence of AI, and those troubles remain even if additional troubles surface. Hammond will be giving a talk about the workforce shortage, something only exacerbated by the number of growing threats.
In a lot of ways, my talk was very
That's Leslie
validating.
Carhart, Director of Incident Response for North America at Dragos.
And it's like, yeah, guys, we've been telling you this for a while. This is pretty bad. You really need to do these preparatory things, and now we see what happens when you potentially don't.
One thing that organizers, speakers, and audience members agree about is that the only way to dig ourselves out of a backlog of conversations that the industry needs to address is for these conferences to start happening again. And while RSA conference, like last summer's Black Hat and DEF CON, is truncated in length and scope compared to a normal year, it certainly feels closer to normal than any major conference before it.
I'm overjoyed. I love being able to get back together in person and have these conferences back. Something like RSA, something like a DEF CON, or like a Black Hat. I always see these as a great sort of family reunion.
This has been a production of SC Media. I'm Joe Uchel. The introductory song was What's the Angle by Shane Ivers. You can hear more of his work at silvermansound.com. Thanks for listening.